Imagine hearing a terrible secret. That fundamentally alters your perspective on loyalty and treachery in a courtroom, where the tension is so high that a knife could sever it. Yes, when his comrade Chrissy revealed a fact so explosive that it felt like a bomb exploded directly in front of Cameron, who has always been the king of cool. He was taken by surprise in the most startling way imaginable. A scandal like that may ruin friendships, careers, and probably even lives. The twist is that Jim Jones, who is imprisoned, is suffering unanticipated consequences as a result of this secret. Because of Chrissy's surprise in court, it's difficult and a total nightmare. But why is there a connection? This life or death narrative will make you reevaluate all you thought you knew about loyalty, treachery, and the price of preserving secrets. It's not only a courtroom drama, the reality will soon become nasty, so I can guarantee you won't want to miss it. Despite being a stage, the drama occurring in the courtroom was analogous to a reality show. The audience's quiet murmurs became loud gasps as the judge struck the gavel, and everyone's focus rightfully so shifted to Cameron. He was Cameron Lampkin, a Harlem hero, one of the creators of Dipset. And the definition of cool, not just another defendant or witness in a court case. But instead of someone else handling the cards today, it looked like Chrissy Lampkin was doing it. The tension was palpable, and Cameron's usual bravado gave way to a strange vulnerability that is unusual in the ego-driven hip-hop scene. When Chrissy dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves across the room, his eyes widened. Her remarks had the potential to devastate everything because they were not just explosive but also radioactive. It wasn't just legal problems along their road. It was the kind of secret that could ruin friendships, careers, and the lives of some of the most famous hip-hop artists. However, what exactly did Chrissy say? It wasn't your normal confession in court, as you likely assumed, but it was personal. It was the kind of treachery that nobody anticipated. Before Chrissy's disclosure, everyone was aware that there were issues in Cameron and Jim Jones' relationship, but no one had any idea how serious they were. Going back a bit, the glamour of the music have caused Cameron and Jim Jones' closest friends, business associates, and fellow Dipset warriors to face their fair share of challenges. These two were not just pals in the fight against their inner demons. They were brothers. However, even the general public was ignorant of the slow decline in their connection over time. According to sources, the two individuals had distinct goals, values, and points of view. Cameron, with his boisterous demeanor and unrestrained views, and Jim Jones, with his more subdued but equally stern demeanor, had always been diametrically opposed in many ways. After years of standing behind Jim, Chrissy Lampkin turned the tables on Cameron and the other people in the courtroom. Chrissy disclosed something startling that rocked the foundation of Cameron and Jim Jones' friendship. The room became icy. It was not just a private issue between the two men, but it may have a lasting impact on their careers. Chrissy's words were like blades, piercing right through the core of their fraternity. The suddenness of it all took Cameron by surprise, and he had no idea what had hit him. What was the secret that made Chrissy confess in spite of the damning evidence? Had Cameron lied about Jim's past for a reason? No, it was more complicated than that. It was a reality that would reveal the basis of these men's trust. Even Cameron's typical sardonic humor and confidence could not conceal the shock he was currently experiencing due to the enormity of the betrayal. The fact that he knew well had shocked him. How could they divulge something so personal? Chrissy was not going to give up, whether you're on the streets or in the spotlight. Trust is what keeps everything together in this game. When it's lost, the repercussions might be deadly. Cameron and Jim had worked together to start their business. But Chrissy's disclosure exposed all that had been going on behind the scenes, and it didn't seem good. Let's start by discussing the repercussions, as Chrissy's secret went awry, impacting not just Cameron and Jim, but the entire hip-hop community. I'll at last discover the truth that might have led to this whole mess. When the news broke, Jim Jones was already incarcerated. His situation there had previously been tumultuous since he was well known, especially in the hip-hop culture, and everyone knew who he was. Other inmates would attempt to conceal their identities, but Jim was unable to do so because everyone was watching him constantly. But his detention had far more detrimental psychological effects than physical ones. This revelation had made his time in prison an awful misery, on top of the difficulty of being separated from his family, his business, and his existence as a hip-hop mogul. Jim Jones was already facing challenges, and his incarceration has only made matters worse. Reputation and trust were more important than physical dangers these days. And Jim could see everything he had worked so hard to create crumbling before his very eyes. Cameron was more worried about embarrassment than going to jail now that he was in trouble. Over the years, Cameron had a solid reputation as one of the major figures in hip-hop. But his status was suddenly called into doubt. How could he reveal his face once more? For what reason could he walk? Fans, media, and even other hip-hop artists had strong feelings on Chrissy's secret, which led to a chaotic public reaction. Others sympathized more with Jim, who is now battling for his freedom and honor, while others were ready to pick sides, endorsing Cameron's shock and incredulity. They couldn't stop wondering, what does this mean for Pet's future? Why now? And how could Chrissy have done this? What would happen, however, was what everyone really wanted to know. Fans couldn't stop discussing Chrissy's bombshell statement on social media, and the upheaval that followed shook the hip-hop industry from coast to coast. In the midst of all the comments and passionate opinions, fans debated who was right and who was wrong as Cameron vs. Jim Jones trended for days. What Chrissy's real reason was, however, was a mystery. Was it an attention-seeking wail or something darker? The debate only got worse over time as a result of more regular leaks began to surface. A claimed source revealed that Chrissy had been hiding this information for months of silent rage, months of seething animosity, and one unexpectedly devastating courtroom scene. These unnamed sources claim that Chrissy had had enough of the continuous arguments between Cameron and Jim Jones, and was resolved not to watch her guy get further involved in the situation. But what had this secret been? No proof had emerged, but the rumors continued. While some thought it was connected to others conjectured that it was treachery on an entirely other level, not just devotion. According to Chrissy, Cameron chose to ignore Jim's unlawful behavior even though he was aware of part of it. Loyalty is highly prized in the very competitive hip-hop industry. Until she said the truth, no one could be certain that Cameron had crossed a boundary with Jim. And when she did, it was much worse than anybody could have predicted. Cameron had been keeping some extremely important details about Jim's past hidden. Chrissy disclosed, and the consequences of those secrets were worse than anything Jim had gone through while incarcerated. Chrissy says that because Cameron had been playing both sides, things worsened, even if it was all for fame and money. He was befriending people who wanted Jim to fail, even though he was Jim's partner, since Cameron had used Jim's legal troubles as a launching pad for his career. He wasn't exactly in a rush to provide him with financial or emotional support while he was incarcerated. Jim's legacy could be forever harmed by Cameron's alleged behind-the-scenes transactions with rival musicians and record labels. Fans of hip-hop were enthralled. The subject suddenly shifted from trust and loyalty, two essential traits in the hip-hop industry, to which side you were on or which of the disputes was more genuine or better. Those principles had been shattered. If the accounts of Cameron were true, despite leaked data showing that Cameron allegedly secured lucrative endorsement deals with big brands while Jim was incarcerated, the most damning evidence of his purported involvement in financial transactions was far murkier than anybody had expected. Jim allegedly gave up the rights to his name, image, and likeness, some of his most precious possessions, in a number of these contracts. In fact, Cameron is accused of using Jim's name to enhance his notoriety while he is battling for his life in prison. These documents show that a number of influential executives wanted Jim gone make agreements that they knew would never have been made if Jim had been free, by promising him higher pay and other perks. They were able to get Cameron to sign these contracts. Asterisk at first. This was merely speculation and internet hearsay, but as more documents were released, the situation became clearer. When the receipts arrived, they were unsightly. Supporters started to wonder if Cameron was indeed the easygoing hip-hop artist they adored, the buddy they thought he was, or just another entrepreneur looking to turn a profit. More importantly, when did he find out? There was disagreement among the public. Some Cameron fans maintained that you had to prioritize interests in the cutthroat world of hip-hop, with him claiming that he was nothing more than a snake if the charges were accurate. In any event, it was clear that the two titans of hip-hop were at odds. It was not just a disagreement, rather, it was the kind of treason that could bring down a whole empire. Legal professionals started to respond. Could Jim bring a lawsuit against Cameron for these purported business transactions? Could Cameron be held responsible for what appeared to be a major betrayal of confidence? Although the solution was unclear, it was recognized that both men may suffer grave repercussions from this episode. Rumor had it that there was a bigger conspiracy going on behind the scenes. After the shocking disclosure subsided, it became clear that Chrissy's court secret would have a lasting impact. The problem got worse every day, and fans, the media, and the company started to notice. Was Chrissy's attempt to pressure Jim into giving Cameron control over their joint ventures part of a bigger plan? Or had she just decided it was time to speak the truth at all costs because she was sick of living in the shadow of the men she loved? Despite the thoughts of each insider, Jim Jones's response to this situation was the most significant. As the clock drew closer to the impending conflict, the globe waited anxiously. Despite some people's hopes that Jim would criticize Cameron on social media, his silence was more powerful than his words. Fans were not pleased with Jim's team's well-written remark, which suggested an impending official response. But they chose not to add to the panic. They urged Jim Jones to take action against the person who had completely upended his life and tricked him become famous and wealthy. The reports of monetary and legal measures, but the severity of legal actions and possible criminal charges only grew. One of the legal experts who started to anticipate that the issue would go to court said, "This could get uglier than anything we've seen in hip-hop history. Betrayal like this doesn't just fade away. It leaves scars," and what he perceived as betrayal. Or was it just another example of how the corporate side of the hip-hop industry can take advantage of broken hearts and destroyed relationships? Started to divide into two groups, each fiercely protecting their idol. Of back and forth. One group called Jim a victim of the game, while the other group called Cameron a traitor and a rapacious opportunist. Then, as allegations began to surface that high-level corporate interests with a financial stake in Dipset's brand might have been involved, things took a darker turn. Was it a straightforward betrayal between pals, or was there a darker conspiracy? At work, was Chrissy's court admission only the beginning of a much more extensive covert plot of lies and manipulation? Jim and Cameron started to feel pressured by money to make certain choices. Rumor had it that Jim's team was receiving advice on how to deal with the consequences from some enigmatic individuals who had extensive connections in the entertainment sector. These individuals warned Jim that he would lose everything if he didn't make amends with Cameron. A new, darker chapter in the story began to emerge as the tension mounted. News of an urgent meeting between their legal teams quickly replaced rumors of possible reconciliation negotiations between Jim and Cameron. Many others speculated as to what they might be discussing. When Jim confronted Cameron, his fans began to feel duped by the person they had been rooting for. Cameron was mostly silent, at least in public, and lacked his typical bluster. A viewer asked, why is he playing nice with the person who stabbed him in the back? Others asked, is Jim really the same street-hardened rapper who once stood tall and proud in the face of adversity? Or has he become just another cog in the machine controlled by people with more power than he could comprehend? To be discovered, and chose to maintain a low-key social media presence instead of taking advantage of the media craze. However, there were whispers in his inner circle that Cameron was preparing to make a comeback as a performer and as the kingmaker of the whole New York rap scene. Some even claimed that labels hoping to capitalize on the turmoil had made him enticing offers. As soon as the crisis began, the story became more complex, and Chrissy made the momentous decision to provide much more information in a widely reported interview. Asserting that Cameron's treachery went, the media covered everything Chrissy stated when she made these shocking new allegations public. It was just impossible to resist the overwhelming sense that two of the most well-known hip-hop performers had abandoned one another, according to her. Cameron had disclosed more frightening personal information to other well-known industry figures who would do whatever it took to safeguard their interests, even if it meant severing long-standing friendships, in addition to some dubious commercial activities. Is this the end of Dipset? Read one headline, while has Cameron sold out his brother for power? Read another. The impacts came swiftly, and the world watched in wonder. As Cameron's sales started to drop, many online users conjectured that his trading career was coming to an end, as many turned to Jim Jones in the hopes that he would somehow overcome this scandal. He began to acquire popularity, and his fan base grew. However, many people knew deep down that Jim would always be plagued by the shadow of this treachery, regardless of how successful he got. However, Chrissy rose to fame on her own. Her judicial disclosure altered the course of events rather than merely igniting a media frenzy. It was clear that Chrissy was at the heart of it all. Others viewed her as a crafty manipulator who was at the game, while others viewed her as a hero for defending her partner. By the time it was all over, the hip-hop culture had changed irrevocably because she had set off a series of events that stunned Jim Jones and Cameron. One of the most dramatic and controversial stories the industry has ever seen is that of Cameron and Jim Jones. No one would ever be the same after the betrayal. The drama and the lies all came together in that one courtroom. Did Cameron mislead Jim about the large sum of money? Or is the story not as complete as we think it is? It won't be known until later what actually transpired behind closed doors, and it might be darker than we ever thought. This is not a very distant story. If you want to be the first to know about any changes on this intriguing topic, click like. If you're startled by what you just heard, please let us know in the comments area below whether you prefer Cameron or Jim. Please subscribe to the channel if you think Chrissy is the real puppet master behind this whole thing. This is just the start. We will be examining each new occurrence as it occurs. The truth always finds a way to come to light, so keep an eye out, because you'll want to be here to see all of the shocking disclosures that are on the horizon. I can promise you that this complicated scenario will lead to further debate in the future. Twist and turn and turn.